Hey everybody, this is Vegan Theology episode 26 with Kevin and Sarah Hale. What's going on, Sarah?
Well, good afternoon, Kevin.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very good.
Yeah,
How are you?
good.
And we hope you, our listener, are having a wonderful day and this day finds you well. We are in Holy Week.
Yeah,
We have made it to the last week of Lent. I think Lent reaches its climax during Holy Week as we've been considering and really confronting everything that is wrong with creation as it stands, everything that's broken and is not the way it's supposed to be with the current fallen world. It kind of comes to a crescendo this week as we consider, the betrayal and the arrest and the corrupt trial and the torture and the execution of Jesus. Yeah, and I remember as a kid, my church really didn't do anything during Holy Week at all.
right.
And I would go to church on Palm Sunday, which was this celebratory Hosanna, waving the palm branches, and then not be back again until Easter morning, resurrection morning, which was another like, woohoo, rah, rah for Jesus.
Right.
And even as a kid, I don't know how old I was at the time, but I do remember thinking it feels like we're missing a big part of this story. Like it's woohoo, and then it's woohoo. And,
Right.
you're like, I remember even feeling like you had to almost manufacture this joy
Yeah,
because you hadn't really walked the walk of that Holy Week with Jesus.
right.
And so it wasn't until I was in college, and I remember one of my floor mates asked me, hey, do you know of any church that does Maundy, Thursday services? And I had never even heard that phrase. I had no idea what she was talking about. And then I think after we got married, we started going to college church in Wheaton, and I went to my first Good Friday service.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah, those were pretty powerful.
This is what I've been missing. And yeah, when you really allow yourself to be affected by what Jesus went through, and you have that worship service. I guess in the past, Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, Resurrection morning, it was all one extended service that the church would celebrate.
Wow.
And now, we break it into pieces, but that Stuckey book that we've been referencing, the church calendar book, says that you should consider it as one service.
Wow.
From Maundy, Thursday through Resurrection Sunday. And yeah, when you do that, it's a lot more meaningful. And then, of course, in the church calendar, Easter season begins, and it's not just one day of celebration, it's 7 weeks Easter season of allowing ourselves just to really bask in what is this new kingdom that we now have access to because of Jesus, and what is the new creation, and how can we live into that? It's also beautiful and meaningful. Of course, the lectionary readings really ramp up for Holy Week as well. So instead of just having the 4 scriptures for each Sunday, during Holy Week, there's scriptures to read each day of the week. So we're not going to go through all of these scriptures. It would take a very long time. But I did read through them, and, I just pulled out some of the ones that jumped out at me. From Isaiah 53, he was led like a lamb to the slaughter. Even the way that he was tied with a rope and kind of dragged along after he was arrested. It's very similar to how animals are treated.
Yeah.
Again, from Isaiah chapter 50, it says, I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. And then jumping to Philippians, one of the passages was from Philippians 2, verses 9 through 11. This is one I would love to do a little bit more study on. I've always wondered about this because, I'll just read it first. For this reason also, God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, of those who are in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and that every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. I love that because it doesn't just say every human knee is going to bow or every human tongue is going to confess. It's every knee, every tongue. And as we know, we're not the only species that have knees and have tongues.
Interesting.
So,
yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I know. I also wanted to read one of the Psalms from the lectionary for this week, Psalm 36, 5-7. And right away, I recognized it as one of the contemporary worship songs that we happen to sing in our church. However, unfortunately, the worship songwriter didn't include the little piece about animals. And I was like, once again, I just wish and I hope for a day when more of our liturgies, more of our worship songs, more of our written prayers, more of our devotionals included animals in the texts. I think that would just make them so much more rich.
Right.
So the psalmist writes...
As well as our theology, because we know a lot of, I want to say, popular theology in churches is informed by praise and worship songs.
Totally.
And hymns. So,
yes.
Yeah.
So I guess we need to start writing some music as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Let's somebody get on that. The psalmist writes, "Your love, Lord, reaches to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Your righteousness is like the highest mountains. Your justice like the great deep. You, Lord, preserve both people and animals. How priceless is your unfailing love, O God." So beautiful.
Yeah.
And for some reason, the psalmist was inspired to remember that God preserves both people and animals, that all are precious to God. I think that a poem I'd like to share this week is G.K. Chesterton's The Donkey. My students actually recited this poem this month, and I just really like it. So here goes. The Donkey by G.K. Chesterton. When fishes flew and forests walked and figs grew upon thorn, some moment when the moon was blood, then surely I was born. With monstrous head and a sickening cry and ears like errant wings, the devil's walking parody on all four-footed things, the tattered outlaw of the earth, of ancient crooked will, starve, scourge, deride me, I am dumb, I keep my secret still. Fools, fools, for I also had my hour, one far fierce hour, and sweet. There was a shout about my ears and palms before my feet.
Wow.
The Donkey by G.K. Chesterton.
Wow, and I just want, for the record, Sarah just recited that from memory right here. And
if my preschooler students could do it, I could do it
well,
too.
they love that little part, right?
Fools.
Yeah. Nice. That was awesome.
I love that because, well, I mean, it's just obvious. Like, nobody cares about the donkey. Nobody loves or reveres the donkey, right? He's kind of a laughable character, not beautiful, not a beautiful voice. And yet Jesus chose a donkey. And I always ask the children, do you think Jesus was harsh with the donkey? Do you think he starved the donkey, or what was it? Starve, scourge? Do you think he scourged the donkey and beat the donkey and derided the donkey and laughed at him? And they were like, no, Jesus would have been nice to the donkey.
Wow.
So
interesting.
Yeah, I like it. It just reminds me, like, that's how Jesus is with us, right?
Right.
Like the least esteemed of us are the ones that Jesus chooses. Again, Jesus turns everything upside down from the way the world thinks we should do things. Yeah. All right. Let's turn to the last chapter of Gayle Boss's book, Wild Hope, Stories for Lent from the Vanishing.
Mm.
I'm kind of sad.
Yeah.
I'm sad to be ending this book. It's really impacted me, even to a point where I'm a little bit surprised how impacted I've been. I think she just gives you a little tiny glimpse into these animals' lives, but she gives you just enough that you're just in awe of their beauty, their abilities, their social structures, their affection, their loyalty.
Yeah.
They're all so amazing, and they all really do put on display God's creativity, God's love of variety. And yeah, to find out that they're struggling just to survive because of our actions and they're disappearing from the planet is really sad. So let's go to her last chapter. She has titled The Desecrated.
This first animal that she mentions in this chapter is the bonobo. And she's taken us to the Congo, and she kind of describes their, I guess, evolution, that they're ancestors of the apes. And at one point in time, a river separated these ancestors. And so one became chimpanzees, the other became bonobos. And yeah, it was really interesting. I guess I didn't realize that these bonobos, they look very similar to chimps. They have darker faces, whereas chimps have lighter faces. That was one distinction that I found between them. But what's interesting about it is that the chimps are still fairly aggressive animals, and they...
Yeah, I mean, she describes how, like you said, they were separated by a river. And the chimps who were on one side of the river had to contend with gorillas. So they had to become more violent.
More fierce.
Yeah, to rival with the gorillas. The bonobos, however, on their side of the river, there were no gorillas. And so they have a completely different social structure.
Right.
So bonobos, one thing that's distinctive about them, but I think this comes up again later in the chapter with another species of animals, is that they're actually matriarchal, or they're led by their females.
Yeah.
Which I just wonder, if I had another lifetime to study biology, like, are animal societies that are led by the females, or human societies that are led by females, are they just automatically more peaceful or not? I don't know. But the bonobos certainly are very peaceful. They don't hurt each other. Basically,
Right.
over and over again, it comes up that they actually settle their conflicts with the use of pleasurable touch and play.
Yeah.
I'm like, that sounds like a way better system
Right. Yeah.
than hurting each other or
Right.
killing each other.
Yeah, I know chimps can be very fierce. So
Mhm.
I just hope if I'm ever out in the Congo, I run into a
Bonobo.
Yeah.
They have precisely ordered bonobo calls that they can understand. So they have a pretty advanced language. They also are just so kind to their young, and they babysit each other's young.
Yeah.
She describes how one adolescent male is playing with a baby. It says he jiggles his legs, bounces the baby. She grins, and he tickles her back, and she laughs and laughs. So very human-like. She says the male bonobo never leaves home. All his life, he looks to his mother for status and defense.
I know. That's crazy. And it looks like the females, they leave, I guess, when they hit puberty, and they go find a mate and build a family outside of their nuclear family.
So yeah, like when the son kind of gets in trouble with some of the other females, the women kind of settle it.
Yeah.
They come together and
Yeah.
figure out how to move past the problem.
Right. That's pretty funny.
But as many of us have heard, right, that the Congo's been embroiled in civil war for a long, long time. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the bonobos have been killed, and there's like a bushmeat market
Yeah.
where they are hunted and then sold in the market for profit.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty sad reading about that, and how even in the market, you see their charred hands and feet. And it seems pretty gruesome, I gotta say.
Yeah. Even though I think, isn't it illegal to be hunting them and selling them in the market, but that it's still happening.
Right.
So, of course, at this market, you can buy antelope meat and bush pig meat and monkeys. But hunters and transporters alike risk the danger over the poverty that gnaws 90% of the citizens there.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this was a very dangerous area she mentions. And during these civil wars, you had a lot of different people coming and fighting, and they were not necessarily from these areas, or because they were fighting and they were out in the bush, they kind of got lost. And interestingly, she talks about when things kind of simmered down a bit, some of the elders would tell stories about how bonobos would share food with people and would also lead people to their homes or to their villages if they were lost. I mean, that's just amazing to me. I think it also inspired these people to unite and protect the forests. And so one thing that's come out of all this, just given the loss of these bonobos, is something called the Bonobo Peace Project, and where it's bringing together scientists and volunteers, journalists, nonprofits, and even tourists to really come in and help preserve and appreciate bonobos to try and keep them from being endangered. So, I mean, that's one of the good things that's come out of this. But yeah, these creatures seem so amazing. This little snippet, this little vignette we have of them, it just inspires me to want to learn more about them.
Yeah, it's just amazing, the creatures that we share this planet with.
Absolutely.
And then Gayle moves to the Atlantic bluefin tuna, which I'm so glad she does.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean, my first thought was, wait a second, there are tunas that are endangered. We're fishing them like crazy.
Right.
And the Atlantic bluefin tuna is endangered.
Well, especially for, sushi and other delicacies, sashimi, these kinds of things. They're very sought after. It's crazy to find out how much they're worth on some of these markets, like upwards of $30,000, which blows my mind.
Yeah. And I'm really glad she does spend some time on a fish, because I do think that even we as vegans sometimes forget to talk about sea life and sea creatures, which we absolutely should not, because the ocean is so important to the planet's health.
Right, the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, for some of us, and I think I'm slowly changing, but there for a long time, I think it's just easier to relate to other mammals and have compassion for cows and pigs and goats and sheep. And then like the further we get away from our own part of the animal kingdom taxonomy, it's like a little bit more difficult to have as much compassion. So some people have less compassion for chickens and turkeys. And then you get to fish and they feel like a completely different thing altogether. But she does a great job of talking about how amazing the Atlantic bluefin tuna is. And so I'm really glad that it's here in this book. So let's get into what she says here.
Yeah, she actually says, which is pretty fascinating to me, she doesn't use the word aerodynamic. I think she uses the word hydrodynamic.
Yeah.
Like, it is one of the most perfect creatures ever made. She says it has the most hydrodynamic shape on the planet. It's a streamlined perfection, and it migrates thousands of miles.
Right. She says it's a natural miracle of its kind, called by many the king, the ultimate fish.
Right.
I know. And he's also beautiful. His back is variegated blues. Belly is a silver iridescence. All of him is flashed with gold. He is ocean light and fleshed. Also, he has a translucent window at the top of his head that funnels light to particles that read Earth's magnetic field. So he has this infallible guidance system.
Wow.
That's tuned into Earth's magnetic field.
That's crazy.
That directs him or helps him navigate where he needs to go.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, come on.
That's a superpower for
it's
sure.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Superior vision. He has all but 2 of his 21 fins and finlets drop into neat little slots. So they flawlessly flush with his body so that he can rocket through the water at 40 miles per hour.
That is crazy. Yeah, this is quite an amazing fish.
Oh my goodness. Also, a wonderful net of veins and arteries are interlaced. So the blood in the net's weave, blood chilled when frigid waters rush into his gills, quickly heats up. So even in the coldest waters, he is warm. His mind, his responses are nimble and keen. So Atlantic bluefin tuna just kind of glide along Atlantic coasts. They can live at least 30 years long, and in that time, they can grow to be a 3/4 ton giant.
Wow.
Of course, they used to be a lot more plentiful, and there's records, historical records of even 2,000 years ago, people would stand up on high promontories, high places, and they would just watch the bluefin tuna come through the Straits of Gibraltar by the millions.
Wow.
They come home to the Mediterranean to spawn, but now they're one of the world's most overfished species, and they're too few to be seen from those high places. So now Gayle Boss writes about how the people who are in the business of fishing these endangered fish, they have a spotter plane going out and searching for them. And then once the spotter plane finds the tuna, they radio a boat and tell them the location. And then the boat goes out and traps the tuna in a net. And in fact, she talks about this story of how they're pulling in the net and they get really excited because one of the ones in the net is enormous. And they actually kill this tuna with a pistol. And right away, his silver blue iridescence it begins to fade. This one is going to give them the biggest profit. The rest of the smaller tuna will also, of course, be sold after they fatten them up for a few months. But yeah, this big one is going to yield them $30,000. It says $30,000 for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my
it's
goodness.
Unreal. They're high-fiving each other.
Mm.
It's pretty sad. It's tragic. I mean, what an amazing animal.
It says, it's said the best chefs can taste how afraid the fish was when he died.
Yeah, I wondered about that. And it does say that customers will pay hundreds of dollars for a few bites of this bluefin tuna.
My goodness. So quite an amazing, beautiful animal that God created just so perfectly.
Right.
And we're wiping them out.
Yeah.
So the third animal in this last chapter takes us to Africa for the African elephant.
Yeah, this is pretty sad.
Yeah, I think after Kevin read this chapter, he texted me, like, the part about the elephant was so sad.
It is. I mean, they're amazing creatures, and it's so tragic.
She opens this part of the chapter talking about that there's a market, right? This illegal market for the ivory from these African elephants. The market that she focuses on is primarily in Vietnam. And it says that though ivory sales are illegal in this tourist center in Vietnam and most of Asia, this is an illegal trade. But the shop is still full of ivory bangles and talismans and all kinds of things for people to buy.
Which is just ridiculous that it's illegal in this tourist area, but yet there are shops full of ivory.
So she takes us to the elephants, and she really does do a nice job of describing just how whimsical and loving and bonded and playful these animals are. And so this is the second, I alluded to there'd be a second animal in this chapter that is matriarchal.
Yeah.
So these elephants are led by their matriarch. She is the one that's responsible to make sure that everybody stays together, that everybody gets all the water and food they need. She's watching out for predators all the time. They kind of look to her. She knows the way that they need to go.
But she can also sense danger. I mean, they look for her. She's like 45 years old, and she has that experience, that life experience that the rest of them don't necessarily have. And it's pretty amazing what a great leader she is.
I know. And I mean, it's so cute how the little ones are shy and they suck on their trunks like a human would suck on their thumb. You easily become very endeared to these elephants. But she says that in this one elephant's lifetime, the humans on Kilimanjaro's plains have killed 90% of her community. 90% of them. And there are some refuges for elephants to, supposedly be safe and free from danger, but these refuges are far too small.
Right. And what's interesting about this particular elephant we're talking about, she's known for her gentleness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like she kind of sends some of the herd ahead in this part of the story because she's staying with a calf who's limping because the calf had fallen into a garbage pit recently. So she's like kind of sends some of them on ahead, and she's keeping pace with this injured one
Right.
to protect, which again, we don't often ascribe virtues such as looking out for those who need help to animals.
Right.
You know, we think that only humans would be so self-sacrificing and patient and caring and nurturing. But, you know, if we just open our eyes, we see that many animals share those characteristics.
Right.
And sometimes even more consistently than we do as humans. And this is where tragedy strikes, because as she's going along with this calf, a gunshot shatters the soft light. She's struck in the chest. She stumbles forward, and she shoves the calf toward the sisters who have turned back to her. And she trumpets, like, run, you know?
Right.
She falls to her knees, and poachers swarm around her and finish her life. And then they take, of course, the two 15-pound tusks and just leave the rest of her there to rot in the sun.
And then her sisters and her family come to mourn her, and they know who she is. This is amazing. This is so sad and tragic that they come and they cry and they grieve, and they do it for days.
Yeah. In fact, the oldest daughter stands over the mother's body for days, even though she's dehydrated, and just because she wants to protect the body from hyenas. And finally, after several days, she has to rejoin her family. Gayle writes, they return to their worn paths of routine as trauma survivors do. But for weeks after that, the family continues to return to the body and visit the body. In rumbling groans, below human hearing, they tell their distress to all the elephants of the plain. This low frequency sound that they're making actually is felt in the ground by other elephants. And then those elephants come to the place of her dying.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, like, when they come back weeks later, her flesh has basically it's gone. So what's left is her skull and her bones, and they still come to this place. They know it's her. And that's, I don't know, it's pretty remarkable to me.
Yeah, she says 72 African elephants a day are killed, 25,000 a year.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's just like, why? You know, you just want to believe at this day and age, we as a human species would be wiser than this. And we would stop killing animals unnecessarily. It's just so unnecessary.
Yeah, and I feel like in this particular story, there is no happy ending on this one, unfortunately.
I don't feel like any of these end
No.
up happy.
Or
But
I mean,
hopeful.
the fact that in some of these cases there are people, there are organizations, scientists that are trying to turn the tide on the extinction of these animals, but in this particular
are working
case,
to protect.
Right. Working to protect some kind of refuge. I mean, you mentioned a refuge, but it seems like very little is being done. I mean, just the rate at which they're disappearing is just unbelievable.
And then we have an animal that I hadn't heard of. I guess several of these animals in this book I had never heard of. This one is the last animal of the book. She assigns this one to actually Easter Sunday. The taki. Is that how we're going to pronounce it?
Taki. That's how I was going to say it. From Mongolia.
Yeah. Had you ever heard of these, Kevin?
No, have not. I knew Mongolia had a lot of horses, a lot of wild horses, and this particular animal basically it's a wild horse. It looks like a wild horse.
Yes. The taki. So she starts this part saying the last wild one vanished from human sight in 1969. So there were no more wild taki.
And people thought they were extinct.
Well, they had some captured. Of course, Europeans and Americans had some in zoos, but yeah, as far as wild ones, they were gone. So I think that might be why she chooses this story last, because it is quite hopeful, because we find out through, as we read this part, that people have devoted their lives to reintroducing Taki out into the wild. So let's get into that. But they say that the Taki was untamable. Of course, Mongolia is a land of extremes, and she says the herds of Taki thrived for tens of thousands of years there. And the nomads believed that they were immortal and brought good luck. And so they drove their sheep and goat herds to where the Taki were grazing. But of course, Europeans and Americans found out about these horses that had never been tamed, and
they're like, yeah, let's go
see how we can exploit this.
Exactly. Let's go. Well, what a challenge. Yeah, let's go take advantage.
So Europeans and Americans would go there to Mongolia, and they would capture the babies by shooting the stallions and the mares. So they would kill their parents, capture the babies, and put them in circuses and zoos. Yeah. And of course, Taki, being the free spirits that they are, would die in captivity very often.
Right.
And it got to the point where there were basically only 12 left on the planet in captivity.
Yeah.
Of course, then they worked to breed them. And so by the early 1990s, zoos and parks in 33 different countries had altogether about 1,500 Takis in captivity. So she talks about this woman. Does she ever name this woman?
No, she does not.
So she references a Swiss woman who found out about these amazing animals. And she basically devoted her life to figuring out how she could get these Taki back out into the wild. In 1993, she selected 6 stallions and 5 mares born in captive breeding, and she brought them out to France onto a plateau that kind of was similar in some ways to Mongolia. And a decade later, she was able to grow the herd to 55 horses. And she said, okay, it's time to take them home. So she started out with just 12 of them in Mongolia, but it talks about how these Mongolian people came out for this.
Right.
It was a very spiritual experience.
Yeah.
They were weeping and crying and so happy to have Taki back.
So yeah, those 12 Taki that she reintroduced into Mongolia, they now roam Mongolian wilderness. They also cross the border into China. And so there are Chinese conservationists who also protect the herd. The same for Ukrainians and Kazakhs and Russians. And so they've expanded into the Russian steppes. And now those 12 Taki have grown into 2,000 Taki, and they run wild and free. They're flourishing in a 1,000 square mile area that's basically the Chernobyl exclusion zone. So, yeah, it's interesting. In 1986, that was considered evacuated and declared a dead zone. But now, these Taki are there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a success story. Like, once they were considered completely extinct in the wild, and now they've been upgraded, I guess, to be designated as just endangered. So they still absolutely need protection. But to go from being considered extinct back to being present and alive and wild is a real win.
It is.
For them and for us.
It's almost like a resurrection.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the animal for Resurrection Sunday.
Yeah. It is a good way to end the book, that we as humans definitely can do better. Gayle just says some really beautiful things as she closes out this chapter about Takis. She says, the Taki was nearly destroyed just for the sake of us dominating them and turning them into profitable pieces of entertainment. But Takis just want to live. She uses this amazing language where we as humans, following in the example of Jesus, our love can take on flesh and we can make all things new. She talks about how love defies cynicism. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
As soon as we become cynical, as soon as we become jaded, as soon as we become hopeless, we stop trying to change anything. But love defies cynicism. Love turns fear and sadness into work. I love that.
Right.
That we can get to work. We can get up again and we can go to work. And it reminds me, I was thinking earlier today, actually, of the animals that are mentioned in our scripture in the Holy Week, in the last week before Jesus goes to the cross. And I was thinking, there's a donkey on Palm Sunday, and there's the sacrificial animals in the temple that Jesus cleanses and rescues when he cleanses the temple. There's also the rooster, right, on Good Friday that crows when Peter was denying his relationship with Jesus.
Right.
And that reminded me of, I've heard someone say that there's an old Hebrew prayer, or there's a passage in the Talmud that basically says something like, be like a rooster. And this person that I heard talking about it, she was like, why does the Talmud say we should be like the rooster? And it was explained to her, at the darkest point in the night, the rooster crows because the rooster is the first one to see the light coming. And as we know, birds can see infrared light. So they literally can see light before we can.
Right.
But at the darkest point, at the most hopeless point, when all seems lost, we can be like the rooster and we can see that light is coming again, that redemption is coming, and we can have that hope. And so I really like how she ends with, love defies cynicism. Love gets to work. It turns our fear and our sadness into work. If we just can remember that and hold on to that, we can continue to do what we can to make the world a better place.
Right. Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed this book. She has this afterword, and she also has this page in her book of different websites you can go to for each of these animals. You can go to websites of organizations who are trying to protect these animals and working to educate the public and work for policy changes. So again, that gives you hope that some of the humans in the world are devoting their lives to saving the lives of animals.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this book.
No, it was very inspiring.
I think it was really good to go through it for Lent.
Yeah, likewise.
What'd you do this weekend, Kevin?
Yeah, we got to see Christspiracy in the theater on Palm Sunday.
Woo!
It was wonderful. Yeah. I think we both really enjoyed it. We invited people from our church and some friends, and we bought a bunch of tickets and gave them to our friends and some church members, and it was good. And I know that we want to have a discussion like in a week or two with our friends, and so we didn't really talk about it too much after the film, but we talked a little bit, and we definitely heard some things, and we could tell that people were definitely challenged by what they, I'll say, experienced in Christspiracy.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like the beginning of a movement.
Yeah.
Good job, Kip Anderson and Cameron Waters. It really is an amazing film.
Right.
Clearly a lot of work went into it, and it covers a lot of ground. There's a lot of content, a lot to discuss, a lot of exciting new things were revealed, I think, for most of us, things that we haven't heard or seen before. And I feel like it's going to get more and more people excited and on board.
Well, I think all it did too is inspired everybody. I feel like, because now there's a community on this application called School, and I just feel like the overwhelming sense I'm getting is that everybody wants to see it again. Everybody wants to dive in and try to understand all this information, all this data.
I really loved Cameron Waters was definitely like born in the church. He's been a Christian from the cradle, clearly a very sincere person whose conscience just wouldn't let him stop thinking about what are the ethics of eating animals.
Yeah.
And I love how near the end of the film, he said, when I started on this journey, I was fearful that I was actually walking away from my faith. But now I see I was actually walking towards and deeper into my faith.
Right.
And so I think for us, that just feels really good to hear.
Yeah.
Because there have been times that I look around myself in a church setting or just a church culture or whatever, and I feel like, do I even still belong here?
Right.
Because it doesn't seem like anybody else. This is even on anybody else's radar.
Right.
And for me to even have it on my radar makes me a little bit of a weirdo.
Right.
So you do feel alienated at times. And so it's just so nice. It's so wonderful to have a film like this and to have the reassurance that, no, actually, we are leaning into our faith as we start to care about the non-human animals we share this planet with.
Right. When I think from this film, just the amount of experts that they pulled together and who are basically supporting these ideas that we're all kind of subscribing to, that we're all inspired by.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. And I think everything, again, I love to say what we're trying to do with this podcast is we're trying to challenge the theology of the day, the mainstream theology in many churches, I'll say evangelical churches, that we know is very anthropocentric. And I feel like just what you started with today in that passage that you read, that you were thinking about the animals. And it just got me thinking, once you start down this path of considering the animals and the restoration of animals in the eternal state, you start to pay attention when you're reading familiar Bible passages that you may not have picked up on the animals before. All of a sudden, you're starting to pay attention. You're starting to wonder about the animals and what passages, like the Philippians that you read.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to our pastor.
Oh, yeah.
Who actually came and watched Christspiracy with us. I don't think I could name any other pastor that I know of who would come.
Right.
So I'm really excited, and that's not lost on me that is a very special thing, that we have a pastor who would expose himself to this.
Yeah, we do have a pretty cool pastor.
We do. So if you're listening, Jason, we love you.
Yeah.
Also, Andrew Lindsay is the star of the show, dudes.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my goodness. Yeah. I loved him before, but after seeing him on this documentary, I just adore Andrew Lindsay.
He's got that twinkle in his eye.
So great.
Oh, he's awesome. I can't wait. There's a documentary about him coming out called The Animal Thing.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to that as well. So I think we will, like I said, there's a group of people. You can probably join the Christspiracy community on School, SKOOL. And there's quite a community building. And there's quite a movement. So, but I think we're going to try to look at some of the points that are made in Christspiracy in future podcasts. So we're looking forward to that. So anyway, thanks for joining us.
Have a great day, everybody.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.